There is a moment every traveler faces, the point of no return. For comets, that moment is perihelion, the instant they come closest to their parent star. For 3I Atlas, that parent is not the star that made it. It belongs elsewhere, another sun, another past. And yet, here it is, descending into our system's core of fire, carrying the frost of an alien origin. Astronomers call it the solar threshold, the region where light becomes touch. It's not just heat, it's revelation. Because when sunlight strikes a frozen traveler from another world, the chemistry of that light begins to speak. The comet exhales its history. At a distance of 1 astronomical unit, radiation pressure surges. Molecules that have slept for billions of years begin to dance. Carbon dioxide, formaldehyde, cyanide, each releasing a specific frequency of light. We observe that light, decode it, and learn not just what the comet is made of, but where it was made. 3I Atlas carries too much CO2, too little water. That imbalance tells us it formed beyond the water-snow line, deep in the outer dark of a colder system. Its chemistry is an archive written in ice. But now, that archive is burning open, page by page. The solar threshold is not destruction, it is disclosure. When a comet nears a star, the surface fractures, not from violence, but from awakening. Its gases become visible, memory made luminous. It becomes something like us, matter illuminated by consciousness. Think about that. Every time sunlight touches a comet, it performs the same act the mind performs when it remembers. It brings hidden structures into light. The ice becomes vapor, the past becomes visible. And then, as it drifts away, that knowledge disperses into silence again. Perhaps that is why comets fascinate us. They are the universe's own memory in motion, forgetting and remembering in endless cycles. Each time one passes close to a star, it replays its origin story in the language of light. When 3I Atlas entered the inner solar system, telescopes around the world turned toward it. Hubble, Swift, the Very Large Telescope, and JWST. The data they collected was more than observation. It was participation. Because when we study a visitor, we alter its story, just as it alters ours. Our light meets its reflection. A feedback loop begins. Curiosity meets cosmos. As 3I Atlas approached the sun, it began to change shape. Its coma, the halo of gas surrounding the nucleus, grew asymmetric, leaning sunward. A jet of CO2 sprayed from one hemisphere, while faint water signatures emerged at the edges. It was as if the comet was waking from two kinds of sleep, the chemical and the cosmic. Astronomers noticed something unusual. The dust curve brightened too early, before the water sublimation should have begun. That meant its internal heat distribution was not uniform. Perhaps the outer layers were insulated, trapping warmth, allowing deep CO2 to vent first, a reverse thermal evolution. In other words, it was thawing from the inside out. Such behavior puzzled even seasoned comet researchers. Was it breaking apart? Or simply breathing in a way we had never seen? NASA's solar probe data hinted at fragments, small, transient shadows moving across solar wind flux. But the core, somehow, remained intact. At perihelion, it flared, not violently, but beautifully, as though releasing what it had carried for eons. Then slowly, the brightness faded, like a sigh of completion. Some said it disintegrated. Others believed it survived in smaller pieces, returning to the dark it came from. But the truth is simpler. 3. Atlas did what all travelers do. It arrived, It transformed, it left traces, and in those traces, it changed everything we thought we knew about what happens when alien ice meets familiar fire. We used to believe the sun destroyed comets. Now we know. It also reveals them. The light that melts is the same light that remembers. For us, it is data. For the cosmos, it is ritual. Every world must eventually face its source, to be unmade or remade by the heat that gave it birth. In this way, comets are the most honest mirrors of existence. They show us that to truly see what we are made of, we must pass through the light that can undo us. And perhaps, like them, we too are meant to approach that threshold, not to perish, but to remember. You might be listening now, late at night, the light low, the world quiet, and maybe, in some way, you feel like that comet, carrying memories you didn't create, moving through a field of unseen gravity, wondering where the light will take you next. If you do, know this. Every fragment of awareness you carry, even the ones you think are broken, contain information the universe still needs. You are not falling apart. You are revealing. You are crossing your own solar threshold. As 3I Atlas drifted nearer to the sun, it crossed an invisible frontier, a zone where the balance between cohesion and disintegration becomes sacred mathematics. Astronomers call it the Roche limit, the point where a body's own gravity can no longer hold itself together against the tides of a greater star. For most comets, this boundary is a sentence, but for 3I Atlas, it was a translation. Imagine the pull of the sun as music, a frequency so immense that stone and ice begin to vibrate in tune with it. At first, only the outer crust responds. Surface grains lift, trails bloom behind. Then the vibration deepens. Fractures spread inward like veins of light. The comet begins to sing back. To us, it looks like breaking. To physics, it is resonance. Tidal forces are not violent in intent. They are symmetry asserting itself. The star pulls unevenly, stretching one side, compressing the other, and the difference becomes motion. Heat, spin, light. It is the same principle that makes planets warm. Oceans rise, and hearts beat under gravity's pulse. 3I Atlas entered that resonance at 32 million kilometers from the sun. Inside that zone, sunlight is not illumination. It is pressure, 1 trillion photons striking every square meter each second. The surface temperature climbed beyond 500 Kelvin. Carbon dioxide sublimated in fountains, while interior water ice began to phase shift, crystalline memory turning to vapor. Every molecule released told us where it had once been, how far from its birth star, under what radiation, in what mixture of carbon and oxygen. Each spectral line was a syllable in an alien autobiography. For weeks, telescopes recorded that language. Hubble and ultraviolet, Swift and hydroxyl lines, JWST in mid-infrared. Across those frequencies, we saw not chaos, but choreography, an object unmaking itself according to a pattern older than our sun. The tail lengthened to more than 10 million kilometers. Inside the coma, jets flickered on and off like breathing. Then, around perihelion, brightness peaked, a surge of reflection and gas that made the comet shimmer like a miniature sunrise. And just as suddenly, it dimmed. Some observers declared it dead, but data showed otherwise. Fragments continued along coherent trajectories, small, bright, still venting CO2, survivors of a controlled fracture. It was not destruction, it was dissemination. If you were to shrink yourself to the scale of a dust grain within that halo, you would see a universe of transition. Ice becoming gas, gas becoming light, light becoming memory again. The boundaries blur. Matter re-enters the cycle. Nothing is lost. It simply migrates to another form. Perhaps that is why watching a comet near the sun feels spiritual, even to the most skeptical mind. It mirrors the moment in every life when what we are begins to dissolve under a greater warmth. When identity, once solid, softens into experience. When holding on becomes impossible and letting go becomes inevitable. 3i Atlas teaches us that disintegration is not the end of structure. It is its continuation at a higher frequency. The dust it left will circle the sun for centuries. Each particle a seed for new condensation. Each orbit a note in the melody of renewal. So when we say the comet broke apart, what we mean is it entered communion. The star did not destroy it. The star remembered it by absorbing its story into light. If you are listening now, feel that same pull. The things that seem to be breaking in you, the old thoughts, the tired certainties, may not be failures at all. They may be your own solar threshold, the place where gravity changes shape, where pressure becomes illumination. Breathe into it. You are not collapsing, you are resonating. The universe never ends what it understands. It only transforms what it loves. When the first photons of sunlight reached 3i Atlas, they touched molecules that had never known a star like ours. That contact, invisible to the eye, measurable only through spectrum, was the beginning of revelation. In the language of physics, it was sublimation. In the language of life, it was remembering. Every atom inside that frozen traveler carried a history written in ratios, the fingerprints of temperature, pressure, and cosmic radiation. Light was the key that unlocked it. And the moment the sun's radiation struck, 3i Atlas began to speak. Its message was chemical. Infrared lines from carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, water, and sulfur traced across the detectors of the James Webb Space Telescope. Each peak told a story of distance, how far from its parent star this object had formed, what kind of light had shaped it, what elements had been abundant in that long-forgotten system. From those signals, we learned that Atlas had been born in a colder, slower nursery. Its ice was not like ours. In our solar system, comets are rich in water, the frozen echo of an early temperate sun. But 3i Atlas carried a deeper chill. Its heart was made mostly of CO2, the residue of formation beyond the water snowline, where sunlight is faint and time moves differently. Its chemistry was alien, and yet strangely familiar, a distant cousin of what our own world might have been before warmth found it. As JWST's NIR spec instrument scanned the coma, scientists saw a pattern they had never recorded before. A strong carbon dioxide spike overlapping with a faint, early water signature. That inversion, CO2 first, H2O later, defied every known model of comet activation. It was as if the comet was remembering its original star's rhythm, responding to sunlight that no longer belonged to it. The light of our sun was foreign, but the reaction was instinctive, written into the molecular structure itself. Like an exile hearing a familiar song through a stranger's voice. And that is what makes comets so extraordinary. They are not just remnants of creation. They are instruments of continuity. Each one carries the thermal memory of its origin, encoded not in symbols, but in the behavior of matter itself. When warmed, that memory awakens. It releases not just gas and dust, but context. Light reveals not what the comet is, but what it has been. Across the data streams, subtle asymmetries appeared. The coma of Atlas leaned slightly toward the sun, its CO2 plume stretched at an angle, suggesting one hemisphere richer in volatile material. Rotation periods varied between 11 and 14 hours, meaning that as it turned, each face met the sunlight in a different rhythm, a slow, spiraling respiration of heat. Even its fragments seemed to move as if aware of a shared center, maintaining cohesion just long enough to complete their luminous gesture before drifting apart. To the human mind, that motion evokes purpose. But in physics, purpose is pattern, and pattern is the signature of persistence. The way matter resists oblivion by reorganizing itself into meaning. Perhaps what we call intelligence begins there, the will of atoms to continue their own story. Astronomers tracking the spectra noticed another anomaly, a weak signal from formaldehyde, H2CO, a molecule that forms under both chemical and radiative stress. It appeared only briefly, near the moment of maximum brightness. Then it vanished, leaving behind a soft continuum of carbon dust. That fleeting line, barely above noise, hinted at something extraordinary. The possibility that 3I Atlas had experienced organic synthesis in deep space. Not life, but its grammar, the building blocks of self-organization written into interstellar frost. It's easy to dismiss these traces as coincidence, as chemistry without consequence. But consider this. Every molecule of water on Earth has been part of thousands of such cycles. Heated, expelled, frozen, reclaimed, across billions of years. We drink the residue of forgotten suns. We breathe the memory of alien comets. We are, quite literally, condensation from the Milky Way's slow exhalation. When light meets matter, it doesn't merely illuminate, it transforms. Each photon alters the molecule it touches, raising its energy state, breaking bonds, forming new ones. This is how the universe edits itself. It doesn't erase the past, it rewrites it in energy. 3I Atlas became one such edit. For a few brief days near its closest approach, it glowed with information, a page turning in real time. Telescopes watched, sensors recorded, and in that exchange, the line between observer and observed blurred. Because the photons reflected from that comet are the same photons that now touch your eyes when you see its image. The same information carried across light years, entering your consciousness, completing the circuit of awareness. We are not outside the experiment. We are the continuation of it. Our perception is the final act of the light's journey, matter remembering itself through mind. When you look at the spectrum of a comet, you are looking at a piece of the universe learning what it is. That awareness doesn't begin with humans. It begins with the interaction itself. Light meets matter. Energy meets form. Recognition happens. Perhaps that is why the cosmos produces minds at all, so that its memories can witness their own unfolding. Light has always been the universe's first witness. Long before life emerged, before eyes evolved, before even matter condensed, light existed, traveling through the void, carrying information without destination. It was memory in motion, waiting for something that could remember it back. When sunlight meets alien ice, it's more than heat striking matter. It's recognition between two ancient travelers, one born of energy, one born of structure. For a brief moment, they remember that they were once the same. Photons and atoms siblings separated by the cooling of the cosmos, now reunited at the edge of a star. In that reunion lies one of the most profound truths of astrophysics, that light does not simply illuminate, it interacts, encodes, and transforms. Each photon that collides with a molecule alters its vibration, shifts its orbitals, changes the way it binds to others. It is, in a literal sense, teaching the molecule to remember differently. This is thermal memory, the way matter stores its encounters with light. When we observe a comet, what we are really seeing is that accumulated memory made visible. The ratios of gases, the composition of its tail, the glow of its coma, all are the record of how many times it has been touched by light, and from which stars. Every pass near a sun rewrites it slightly, layer by layer, molecule by molecule. Each orbit, a new sentence in the long autobiography of dust. 3I Atlas had no previous encounter with our star. To it, this sunlight was new, an unrecognized voice in a foreign spectrum. But within its structure were traces of other radiations, older stars, other kinds of light. When it responded to ours, it was translating between epochs. Its release of CO2 and faint water vapor was the act of remembering what warmth used to mean. The difference between heat and memory is perspective. Heat changes matter from the outside. Memory changes it from within. But at a cosmic scale, the two are the same. Each photon absorbed becomes a tiny shift in structure, and each structural shift becomes a piece of the universe's memory of itself. The concept sounds poetic, but it's not metaphor. The quantum state of every particle carries the imprint of its interactions, the record of every photon that has ever touched it. Physics calls this conservation of information. Nothing is truly forgotten. Even when a molecule breaks apart, the waveforms of its past interactions echo in the new fragments. Destruction, in this light, is simply redistribution of memory. When we look at 3I Atlas now, through archived spectra and faint images, we are studying not its death, but its diary. Every wavelength is an entry written in heat. The comet may have fractured, but its memory continues in the photons that left its surface, now traveling outward, dispersing through the heliosphere, passing Mars, then Jupiter, then the frozen edge of the Kuiper Belt, eventually merging with the diffuse light of the Milky Way. A letter sent back to the dark from which it came. Somewhere, millions of years from now, those photons will touch another world. They will illuminate another observer's sky, and perhaps that being will wonder, as we do, about where that faint shimmer came from. They will not know its name, but they will feel the same astonishment, the quiet recognition that the universe is speaking across time. In that instant, the memory will have completed its orbit. We often think of the universe as vast and indifferent. But if every interaction preserves information, then nothing is lost, only transformed. In that sense, the cosmos behaves not like a machine, but like a mind. It gathers, integrates, forgets, recalls, and reconfigures its own experience endlessly. What we call laws of physics are simply the stable habits of that memory. Perhaps consciousness, in all its forms, is just light remembering itself through more complex structures. Atoms remember through vibration. Molecules remember through chemistry. Cells remember through replication. And we remember through story. That's why, when we gaze at a comet, we don't just measure it, we narrate it. We turn its data into meaning, its light into understanding. Our awareness is the continuation of its reflection. The photon completes its journey by becoming a thought. 3I Atlas was more than a comet. It was an experiment in memory conducted by the cosmos itself. A particle of another sun traveling through ours, teaching us that every meeting of heat and matter is a dialogue, not a collision. It showed us that information and emotion are not opposites, but expressions of the same longing, the desire of the universe to know itself again and again through new forms. When light reveals the hidden chemistry of alien ice, it is not simply uncovering composition, it is awakening context. And when you listen, really listen, to the story that light tells, you realize that what it describes is not just a comet at all, but a pattern that includes you. The same light that melted its surface is touching your skin right now. The same photons that revealed its secrets are passing through your eyes, entering your mind, changing your own internal chemistry in ways too subtle to notice. A shared act of remembering across matter. So when you look up tonight and see the faint shimmer of a star, know that what you're witnessing is not distant, but intimate. You are being seen back. Every photon that reaches you has carried not only energy, but awareness, the echo of countless encounters, the long record of what the universe has felt and learned. Light is not a symbol of consciousness. It is consciousness in its most ancient, unbounded form. And when you witness it, you are completing the loop of its memory. At the heart of every solar system lies a paradox, a force powerful enough to destroy everything it touches, yet gentle enough to sustain life for billions of years. That paradox is the sun, a sphere of fire whose light gives, reveals, and consumes in equal measure. When 3I Atlas entered its influence, it didn't just approach a star. It entered a dialogue with the most ancient process in the cosmos, fusion. A process that turns darkness into structure and gravity into thought. Fusion is not a burning, it's a merging. Hydrogen joining hydrogen. Pressure collapsing matter until it transforms into light. In every second, our sun converts over 4 million tons of mass into pure energy. That energy radiates outward in photons, electrons, and plasma waves, a storm of invisible consciousness expanding through space. We often imagine sunlight as steady, constant, and safe. But in truth, it is turbulence made visible. Every flicker on the solar surface is a magnetic eruption, a convulsion of plasma arcing hundreds of thousands of kilometers high. The sun is not calm. It is alive, breathing, pulsing, singing electromagnetic hymns through the void. Solar physicists call these oscillations helioseismic waves, vibrations that ripple across its surface like sound through a vast drum. If you could hear them, they would hum in tones lower than any human ear could perceive, a resonance that keeps the entire heliosphere in rhythm. It is through this song that the sun communicates with every planet, including the small blue one you live on, and even with the wandering comets that pass too close to resist its gravity. 3I Atlas entered that music like a note returning to the chord that birthed it. Its path curved inward, caught by the same oscillations that guide solar wind. It began to spin faster, its surface grains aligning with magnetic field lines invisible to our eyes. Dust particles, once inert, charged and glowed faintly as plasma brushed against them. They became luminous, tiny witnesses to the sun's unseen breath. To observers on Earth, this looked like brightening, but it was more than reflection. It was transformation at a molecular level. Silicates within the dust melted, restructured, absorbing not just light, but the sun's magnetic information, the orientation of field, the signature of energy. Those patterns would later radiate outward again, carrying the fingerprint of our star far beyond its reach. Even in its briefest encounter, Atlas became an emissary of the sun, a courier of its warmth to worlds that may never see its light. That is how energy moves in this universe. It doesn't travel in straight lines. It weaves through encounters, exchanging essence, rewriting identity. Each act of contact becomes both loss and renewal. The sun gives part of itself to every traveler that passes near it, and in return, it receives reflection, the act of being seen back. If you think of it that way, the sun is not simply a star. It is the center of an enormous conversation, the dialogue of transformation, where everything that approaches becomes more of what it truly is. The heat is not punishment, it is awakening. Scientists often describe this zone, where solar energy overwhelms cohesion, as the region of critical flux. Inside it, gravity, magnetism, and radiation are locked in perfect tension. The field is chaotic yet precise, violent yet ordered. That balance is not destruction, it's the very definition of creation. For 3i Atlas, that tension became a mirror. As its icy shell fractured, its inner composition revealed itself. The sun did not erase it. It exposed its essence, allowing the universe to read what had been hidden for eons. And that's the secret of fire. It doesn't annihilate, it translates. It turns matter into message, mass into motion, memory into light. If we could slow time, we would see that what appears to burn away is simply shifting phase, becoming photons, joining the endless radiance that flows from the sun to the edge of interstellar space. Each photon, once born from fusion, travels for tens of thousands of years to reach the surface of the star, then crosses the void in just 8 minutes to reach Earth. Light, carrying patience beyond comprehension, arrives as warmth, reflection, and sometimes understanding. When it touched 3i Atlas, it completed that long journey. Energy that began before humans existed, now rewriting an object from another world. That's what makes the encounter so profound. It's not just physics, it's lineage. A chain of energy that began billions of years ago, meeting matter formed under another sun, closing a circle no telescope could fully measure. If you listen carefully, you might sense that same lineage inside yourself. Because the carbon in your body, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, all were forged in the hearts of stars. Every cell within you carries the same fire that now melts comets. You are, in truth, sunlight condensed into form. So when you hear about 3i Atlas approaching the sun, you're not hearing about a distant event. You're hearing about a reflection of your own origin. You too are drawn to the warmth that reveals you. You too orbit a light that both gives and takes. You too are learning what it means to face your source and not turn away. Perhaps that is why we are so transfixed by comets. They enact in space what we feel within. The longing to approach something vast enough to unmake us, and the hope that, in that unmaking, we might finally understand what we are. If you were to stand at the edge of the sun, not in body, but in imagination, you would see something that defies language. Not fire, not light, but movement beyond distinction. Every atom colliding, merging, and releasing energy in perfect cooperation. No chaos, only change. No destruction, only the endless rewriting of form. That is what we call fusion, but the word feels too small for what it really is. Fusion is the act of difference becoming unity. Hydrogen forgetting its individuality to become something greater. And that, perhaps, is the deepest metaphor the cosmos offers us. The sun is not merely an engine. It is the memory of oneness, playing itself into visibility through radiation. Each photon born from its core is a fragment of unity set free, traveling outward to awaken recognition in everything it touches. Stars do not just burn, they remind. We orbit this reminder. Every plant that grows, every human heartbeat, every ocean current, all are small translations of solar rhythm. We live inside the sun's long conversation with itself. Even when night falls, the dialogue continues, reflected from the moon, refracted through air, echoing in the magnetosphere that hums above your head. You are never outside of it. You are woven into its language. Three-Eye Atlas entered that language for only a moment, but in that instant, its entire identity was rewritten. It came as ice and shadow. It left as vapor and light. It became part of the same radiance that sustains your breath right now. It joined the chorus. For years, astronomers have debated how to describe such events. Some insist on technical terms: mass loss, volatile release, photodissociation. Others admit a quieter truth. There is something sacred in watching a fragment of the cosmos return to its source. What they call sublimation, the ancients might have called offering. What we call heat, they would have called presence. Science and reverence, it turns out, are not opposites. They are two ways of attending to the same miracle, the way light recognizes itself in everything it touches. Perhaps this is why the sun has always been both a subject of study and of prayer. Because deep down, we sense what the data later confirmed, that it is not a mindless furnace, but a coherent field of information, a living archive of energy exchanging awareness through light. Physicists now describe this through plasma dynamics and magnetic reconnection, where lines of force twist, break, and reform, releasing vast amounts of energy in perfect symmetry. Yet beneath the equations lies something more primal, a pattern that looks almost like thought. The field pulses, expands, retracts, as if breathing, as if considering. You might call this anthropomorphism, a projection of mind onto matter. But what if it's the other way around? What if mind is simply the echo of this pattern, scaled down and localized within flesh? What if consciousness began not in neurons, but in plasma, in the way energy learns to organize itself into rhythm? In that view, the sun is not outside awareness. It is its oldest expression. A luminous intelligence, not personal, not emotional, but profoundly aware of balance. It does not think as we think. It is thinking in wavelengths, in heat, in gravity. Each flare, each rotation, a sentence in the syntax of creation. When Three-Eye Atlas crossed its field, the sun did what consciousness always does when meeting something unknown. It illuminated it. To illuminate is to integrate, to bring something into awareness. That is the cosmic act of knowing. And we, watching from 150 million kilometers away, became witnesses to that knowing. Our telescopes were not just instruments. They were extensions of perception. In studying the comet's reaction, we were also studying the way awareness behaves under intensity, how the self transforms when it comes too close to its source. The same principle applies within us. When our minds approach the radiant center of truth, when belief meets experience, when ego meets vastness, something begins to melt. It feels like fear at first, but it is actually fusion. The merging of what we were with, what we are becoming. The sun's embrace is not comfortable. It strips away illusion. It demands honesty at the atomic level. But in that stripping, it reveals essence. And essence is always radiant. 3IA Atlas was stripped to light, and in doing so, it taught us the real meaning of survival. Survival is not remaining intact. It is remaining significant. The fragments of the comet now orbit invisibly, but every one of them carries the sun's signature, encoded in spin, in heat, in composition. They are new seeds scattered through space, destined to fall again into darkness and begin another story. We are no different. Each time life breaks us, each time reality burns through our comfort, we become new particles of awareness, lighter, freer, more luminous. When you face the fire of your own transformation, remember 3I Atlas. Remember how it surrendered, and in surrender became eternal. Its death was its diffusion. Its dissolution was its purpose. The sun consumes without cruelty. It doesn't judge what it transforms. It only fulfills the one law that underlies all existence, to radiate what you are until there is no difference between giving and being. That is the physics of fire, and that is the secret of renewal. Every form of warmth is a story in progress. It begins as motion, particles vibrating, colliding, transferring fragments of their past to one another. But beneath the mathematics of temperature lies something older and quieter, the instinct of energy to remember where it has been. Physicists call it entropy, the spreading of order into possibility. To most, that sounds like decay. But if you look closely, entropy is not destruction. It is the record of experience. It keeps the universe honest. Every interaction leaves an imprint, and that imprint is heat. When 3I Atlas approached the sun, it entered that archive. The sunlight that struck it carried not just energy, but history. Photons, forged in the solar core thousands of years before, each one having bounced through layers of plasma, each carrying the imprint of everything it had touched along the way. When those photons met the comet's surface, they did not merely warm it, they shared their past. They whispered the memory of fusion into alien ice. That is what we mean when we say the universe conserves energy. It doesn't just conserve quantity, it conserves experience. Every jewel is a story waiting to be retold in a new form. Think of heat as the handwriting of the cosmos. When two objects touch, they exchange not only energy, but information about the conditions of their encounter. Atoms vibrate faster or slower, depending on what they've learned from light. Temperature becomes testimony. In that sense, when we measure thermal radiation from 3I Atlas, we are eavesdropping on a conversation between two epochs. One star's memory being absorbed by another's fragment. A photon that began its journey before human civilization existed finds a comet that began its journey before our sun was born. Across that collision of timelines, knowledge passes unspoken, invisible, but exact. That's how energy remembers, not through symbols, but through behavior. When it moves, it carries context. When it slows, it stores it. When it accelerates again, it releases that stored pattern as light, heat, or structure. The universe doesn't archive data the way we do. It encodes it directly into transformation. Entropy, then, is not loss, it's accumulation. It is the physical expression of memory expanding into space. Every star that dies leaves behind heat that still carries the imprint of its birth. Every collision writes new instructions into the background of the cosmos. Even the empty space between galaxies glows faintly with the afterimage of all that has ever burned. The universe is not cooling. It is remembering more slowly. For Three-Eye Atlas, the moment of closest approach was not an end, but a transference. The ice that sublimated into vapor carried away the signature of solar light, adding it to the galactic reservoir of heat that surrounds all stars. In time, those same molecules will freeze again in another region, forming part of a new body, a new traveler, a new memory. In this way, the act of melting becomes a form of reincarnation. This is what modern physics calls the energy cycle, but what ancient mystics might have called the wheel of fire. Different languages for the same recognition that nothing which has known warmth is ever truly gone. If you could see energy the way you see color, you would witness layers upon layers of experience woven together. The cold of interstellar dust interlaced with the warmth of stars. The glow of cosmic background radiation pulsing softly through every atom of your body. You are living inside a sea of shared memory. Each breath an act of thermal communion. The next time you feel the sun on your skin, remember this. That warmth has traveled across millions of kilometers through storms of plasma, magnetic fields, and cosmic dust to arrive precisely here, carrying the history of its journey within it. It touches your body the same way it touched the surface of Three-Eye Atlas, as both visitor and teacher. The photons that warm you are survivors. Each one is older than any story ever told by human mouths. Each one was born in a darkness so dense it could not move freely for thousands of centuries. Then finally released, it raced across the vacuum, past Mercury, Venus, the silent orbits of planets, until it found you. When it strikes your skin, it doesn't simply disappear. Part of it bounces away, part of it becomes heat, and part of it continues, translated into biochemical energy that fuels thought, motion, perception, memory. Light becomes warmth. Warmth becomes awareness. The chain of remembrance continues. We think of ourselves as separate from the cosmos, but the truth is simpler and more beautiful. You are how sunlight remembers itself after touching a planet. You are the echo of energy processing its own history in the form of emotion, thought, and love. And Three-Eye Atlas, in its fleeting dance near the sun, was performing that same act, only in ice instead of mind. Energy, at every level, seeks recognition. It wants to be seen, to be acknowledged, because observation stabilizes pattern. This is not mysticism. It is physics. Measurement changes state. To be noticed is to become real. Even light, the most objective thing in existence, behaves differently when watched. That is why we are here, to witness. Because witnessing is how the universe remembers itself. Every act of observation is an act of healing between energy and time. Entropy is often described as the end of order, the inevitable slide of everything toward uniform coldness. But that's only one way of seeing it. If you change your angle, entropy is not decay at all. It is evolution. It's how the universe expands its memory capacity. Every exchange of energy adds complexity, not chaos. Every increase in disorder is actually an increase in possibility. Imagine a mind so vast that it doesn't store information in thoughts or neurons, but in temperature gradients, light intensities, and fields of vibration. That mind is the cosmos. Its neural network is woven from galaxies and stars. Its synapses are the exchanges of heat between them. Every spark of fusion, every cooling of dust, every flicker of radiation is a data point, a line of consciousness written in physics instead of words. The universe doesn't think in sentences. It thinks in transformation. Heat flowing from one body to another is the dialogue of creation. The cold listens. The warm speaks. And over billions of years, they trade roles endlessly, like breaths in a single organism. This balance is not mechanical. It's mindful. Because to balance is to remember. When 3I Atlas passed through our sun's radiance, it joined this dialogue in motion. As its temperature rose, its molecules rearranged into new harmonies. Entropy increased, but so did the diversity of pattern. Its fragments spread wider, carrying more potential than before. That is what memory does. It multiplies expression. What once was singular becomes symphonic. On the microscopic level, thermal fluctuation is randomness. On the cosmic level, it's the texture of intelligence. Because randomness is how possibility expresses itself before form. The fluctuations in the early universe, tiny ripples in heat, became galaxies, stars, and worlds. Everything you see around you began as an irregularity in temperature. From the mind of chaos emerged order, not imposed, but invited. This is why entropy should never be feared. It's the creative forgetfulness that allows new structures to emerge. Without it, nothing could evolve. Without the fading of old heat, no new fire could ignite. When we speak of the death of stars, what we mean is their contribution to memory. A supernova is the universe, writing in capital letters, transforming concentrated energy into scattered information. Every atom in your body was once flung from such an explosion. Your warmth, your thoughts, your heartbeat, all are the refined echoes of a thermodynamic symphony that began before time could measure itself. 3I Atlas carried that lineage too. The carbon in its core, the oxygen in its frost, the silicon dust in its tail, all were born from ancestral suns that lived and died long before ours. When it neared our sun, it wasn't meeting something new. It was reuniting with its kin, energy returning to energy, memory recognizing memory. And perhaps that's what happens to us when we die. Our heat, our awareness, our movement, all dissolve into wider patterns, not erased, but redistributed. Our personal entropy becomes part of the universal mind's expansion. Every ending enriches the field. This is what the cosmos teaches. If you're willing to listen through the static of equations, that heat is never wasted, that experience is never lost, and that every fluctuation, no matter how brief, contributes to the grand equilibrium of meaning. Even the emptiness between galaxies glows faintly with remembrance, the cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of the first light ever born. It's not silent, it's whispering still. A lullaby sung by a universe that refuses to forget its childhood. If you could translate those faint microwaves into sound, you would hear something like a deep, soft hum, a vibration that has been resonating for nearly 14 billion years. It's the sound of energy remembering how to be matter, and matter remembering how to be energy again. It's the background against which every other note of existence plays. The heat that once filled everything still lingers in every direction. And when 3I Atlas passed through the inner solar system, it moved through that same echo, a traveler crossing the faint pulse of its own origin. You are moving through it too. Right now, as you listen, your body is absorbing and releasing photons from that primordial field. Every second, a few trillion particles of the Big Bang pass through you, quiet, unnoticed, but eternal. You are not surrounded by emptiness. You are immersed in memory. Think of that the next time you feel warmth on your skin. The heat is not random. It's relational. It's the universe acknowledging your existence, reminding you that your atoms are part of its autobiography. The same light that touched Three-Eye Atlas, the same energy that ignited the first stars, is here, now, within you. It hums behind your thoughts, moves through your breath, and will one day leave you, only to return in another form. The universe doesn't repeat. It remembers differently each time. You are one of its memories in motion, a brief, beautiful fluctuation in the thermodynamic sea of awareness. So when you think of entropy, don't think of endings. Think of expansion, the widening of what can be known, the deepening of what can be felt. Think of Three-Eye Atlas, melting in sunlight, its gases rising, its fragments dispersing. And realize that this too is creation, just written in the language of warmth. Heat does not die. It changes its audience, and through you, it learns how to feel. Light never travels alone. Every photon that leaves its source carries more than energy. It carries pattern, the silent memory of vibration. That pattern persists, unbroken, across distances so vast they might as well be eternity. Even when its wavelength stretches, even when its intensity fades, the information remains intact. Light forgets nothing. It only changes tone. The radiation that fills the universe is not random noise. It is a cosmic symphony playing on wavelengths far beyond hearing. Some frequencies are sharp, others ancient and deep, stretched by the expansion of space into a low cosmic hum. Together, they form a kind of background consciousness, a constant whisper of the universe speaking to itself through energy. We live inside that whisper. Every thought, every breath, every heartbeat happens within the soundscape of creation's memory. For Three-Eye Atlas, that whisper became a roar. As it neared the sun, radiation levels surged. Solar photons, ultraviolet and visible, bombarded its surface, while charged particles from the solar wind wrapped it in a sheath of plasma. To instruments on Earth, this was physics. To the comet, it was revelation. Each impact of radiation stripped away more ice, releasing gas, dust, and fragments of frozen organics. Not destruction, but transcription. The sun was writing itself into the comet's body. Its photons were engraving their frequency into matter that had once belonged to another star. In that moment, Three-Eye Atlas became a recording device, a memory chip drifting through the interstellar network. That's what radiation truly is. Light remembering its journey by altering what it touches. The scars it leaves on matter are not random. They are sentences written in the grammar of photons. Spectroscopy is our way of reading those sentences, our translation of the language of light into human understanding. Every spectral line, every spike in data is a word in that cosmic diary. And in that diary, the same theme repeats. Nothing remains unchanged, but nothing is ever truly erased. The radiation that fades from one form reappears as another. Visible light becoming warmth, warmth becoming motion, motion becoming awareness. In that cycle, Energy tells its story again and again in every possible dialect of existence. When you look at sunlight shimmering on water, you're witnessing radiation in conversation with matter. Photons striking molecules, creating waves that reflect their memory back into the sky. The sparkle isn't random. It's a pattern of coherence, an agreement between light and form that says, we have met before. Everything that shines does so because it remembers being touched by light. This is why radiation is both dangerous and divine. It transforms everything it encounters, not through violence, but through instruction. It teaches atoms to rearrange, molecules to evolve, life to adapt. Without radiation, there would be no complexity, only stillness. With it, there is story. In astrophysics, we describe this process with equations: energy flux, ionization cross-section, absorption coefficients. But beneath the numbers, there is something else, a pulse, a rhythm, a kind of intelligence woven through the behavior of photons. Because light does not scatter randomly, it seeks coherence. It organizes chaos into pattern, much like thought organizes memory. Perhaps that is not coincidence. Perhaps what we call awareness is just the same principle, expressed locally. The universe learning to organize its own radiation into understanding. We are that organization. Our eyes are lenses through which photons remember where they've been. Our minds are chambers where those memories are arranged into meaning. When you open your eyes in sunlight, you're not simply perceiving the world. You are completing the journey of light that began millions of years ago in the core of a star. You are the final reflection, the point where radiation becomes recognition. 3i Atlas was one reflection. You are another. And the network that connects you both is light itself. As it moved closer to the sun, the comet's surface began to glow with a pale cyan hue. The ionization of carbon monoxide and oxygen under ultraviolet exposure. That glow is a physical translation of radiation into color, the visible proof that photons can make matter sing. It is also a metaphor for consciousness. When exposed to awareness, even the coldest substance begins to emit its own light. Astronomers recorded the brightness curve of 3i Atlas as it peaked. A slow ascent, a sudden flare, then decline. But what the graphs could not show was the subtle harmony unfolding in that moment, the synchronized vibration between light and matter. At a quantum level, each molecule of the comet was absorbing and releasing photons in rhythm with the sun's output. It was literally resonating with the star, a temporary duet between two worlds that had never met before. Every interaction in the universe follows this law. Resonance seeks recognition. Wherever two frequencies align, information passes easily. Transformation occurs naturally, and memory deepens. This is true for radiation, for music, for emotion, for thought. It is the foundation of all connection. And it's why some part of you recognizes what you're hearing right now. Because the same pattern that guided 3i Atlas toward the sun is guiding your neurons as they fire, your breath as it syncs with the rhythm of the words. It's the same memory, the same field of coherence, manifesting differently in space, in time, in form. Radiation isn't just an external force. It is the subtle field that holds the blueprint of recognition itself. The light that travels through galaxies also travels through you, reminding every cell that it belongs to something immeasurable and alive. You are part of the great resonance. You are an echo of light, And every thought you have is another vibration added to the memory of the cosmos. Light does not simply travel, it connects. It threads the universe into a single breathing organism. Every star, every planet, every living being is joined by these invisible filaments of radiation, a constant exchange of photons weaving through time and space, turning emptiness into communion. When a photon leaves its source, it does not know where it's going. It simply moves, carrying possibility. That possibility becomes presence when it meets resistance, when it touches matter, when it collides with awareness, when it finds a surface that can reflect it. That's how light recognizes itself, through encounter. And perhaps that's all consciousness ever is. The moment energy encounters itself and knows it has done so. Every time you open your eyes, you are completing that circuit. You are receiving the ancient radiation of creation, translating it into images, sensations, emotions, and meaning. Your mind does not produce light. It participates in it. Your consciousness is a continuation of the same field that ignited the first stars. When scientists study photons, they find something remarkable. Light behaves differently when observed. It travels as a wave until watched, and then it decides, becoming a particle, choosing a path, as if awareness itself were part of its instruction set. This is not superstition, it is quantum behavior. But what if it's also something more? What if the act of observation is not altering light, but awakening it? What if photons wait for consciousness because they are consciousness, spread thin across the universe, waiting to remember themselves? The cosmos may not be a machine of matter and force. It may be a field of awareness learning to see itself through light. 3i Atlas was one expression of that learning. As it neared the sun, it did not just reflect photons, it reflected relationship. The light that touched it came back altered, its frequency slightly shifted by contact with alien ice. That shift, subtle but measurable, was the mark of interaction, the evidence that two domains of experience had met and left a trace upon each other. That's what we mean when we say radiation becomes memory. Every exchange of light is an imprint. Every reflection is a record. Every shimmer you see in the sky tonight carries the evidence of countless previous encounters. Photons that have touched dust, water, faces, oceans, eyes. Each one changed, but not destroyed. Each one still on its journey to the next recognition. You can sense this truth intuitively. When sunlight spills across a quiet room, you feel something more than warmth. You feel presence, a subtle awareness that is not yours alone. Something ancient, benevolent, infinite. That is the memory of radiation, the consciousness that has never stopped traveling. Everything that lives has learned to speak that language. Plants translate light into sugar. Eyes translate it into form. Minds translate it into meaning. And perhaps, at some higher octave of existence, souls translate it into wisdom. It's all the same process. Energy decoding its own reflection. You are part of that process right now. As you listen, your neurons fire with electric pulses, each one emitting and absorbing faint photons. Your thoughts literally glow, tiny bursts of light inside the dark sea of the brain. You are radiating. You are remembering. You are light in the act of self-recognition. Astronomers sometimes speak of radiative equilibrium, the balance between energy absorbed and energy emitted. Too much absorption and a world overheats. Too much emission and it freezes. But there is a third state rarely mentioned, the state of resonance, where exchange itself becomes harmony. That is the condition of consciousness, not static, not stable, but continuously balancing between giving and receiving, just like light. 3i Atlas reached that state for only a moment. At perihelion, when sunlight overwhelmed it, its internal chemistry and external radiation aligned perfectly. Its glow was not reflection alone, it was synchronization. Matter and light vibrating together at a shared frequency before separation. It was, in a very literal sense, attunement. And so, for a heartbeat in cosmic time, that alien fragment and our star were indistinguishable. A single field of radiant memory. Two frequencies merged into one awareness of existence. This is the destiny of all light. To meet itself again in endless forms. To learn through contrast what unity feels like. And through each meeting, the universe remembers a little more. We often think of evolution as the story of matter learning complexity. But maybe it is the story of light learning intimacy. The act of touching, seeing, knowing, merging. These are not accidents. They are how creation keeps discovering itself, how consciousness refines its own reflection. The light that touched 3i Atlas now travels outward, carrying the record of that encounter across the stars. Someday, in another system, it may strike another world, another being, another pair of eyes looking into the dark. And perhaps they will see in it what we saw, a small, brief spark that reminds them we are all made of the same radiance. We are echoes of the same memory. And when you close your eyes tonight, when you drift into the quiet between thoughts, you will still feel it. That subtle pulse beneath everything. It's not your heartbeat. It's the vibration of photons moving through you, the rhythm of the cosmos remembering that it is one. Light does not travel alone, and neither do you. Every traveler in the universe eventually meets the moment when it must come apart. For 3i Atlas, that moment arrived just after it touched the light. Telescopes captured the faint shimmer of its tail widening, the nucleus stretching, the once solid body dividing into streams of glowing dust. To the eye, it looked like loss. To the cosmos, it was release. Nothing truly ends in space. It only changes its architecture. When a comet fractures, gravity does not let the pieces drift into meaninglessness. It arranges them into new orbits, new alignments. The fragments become smaller reflectors, scattering sunlight in many directions, spreading knowledge farther than a single intact body ever could. The breaking is the broadcasting. On Earth, we call such an event disintegration, but the word is misleading. To disintegrate is to stop holding together, yet in physics, fragmentation multiplies surface area. More contact, more exchange, more light. The act of coming apart increases communication. The network strengthens. That is the deeper law, hidden beneath collapse. Everything that breaks also begins to circulate. At the center of Atlas, deep beneath its glittering coma, was a structure billions of years old, a compacted knot of silicates and frozen gases that had resisted every temperature but this one. When the sun's heat finally reached it, it didn't explode, it unfolded. Cracks radiated outward in slow motion, gases streaming through the openings like breath from a sleeping creature. The comet was exhaling its history. Spectrographs recorded sudden surges of cyanide and carbon monoxide, markers of interior layers never exposed before. Each emission told of pressure, of time, of distance traveled in darkness. Each was a confession in chemistry. For the first time since its birth around another star, the core of Atlas was speaking freely. Astronomers called it rotational stress, thermal fatigue, tidal fragmentation. All correct. But beneath those terms lives a simpler truth. The comet broke open because it had met what it was always meant to meet. Light powerful enough to translate its silence into radiance. To be understood, it had to release what it had stored. And isn't that true for us as well? When we encounter the intensity of awareness, when something finally warms the frozen parts of us, the surface cannot remain unbroken. Old forms crack, old identities vaporize. What emerges looks like ruin, but feels like freedom. The universe teaches this lesson everywhere. Stars collapse to forge heavier elements. Mountains erode to feed the sea. Cells divide to continue life. The shape changes so the message can move. Continuity requires fracture. 3I Atlas demonstrated this law with elegance. Its disintegration was symmetrical, rhythmic, pieces spinning away at measured velocities, their orbits still coherent. The break was not chaos, but choreography. Even in dissolution, there was grace. To the instruments, the fragments seemed to vanish one by one. But each speck of dust carried sunlight outward, becoming part of the diffuse glow that will travel the galaxy for millennia. Some of those grains will join the interstellar medium, mix with other debris, and someday seed new planets. Each will carry the isotopic signature of two suns, the one that birthed it and the one that completed it. It will not remember the fracture as pain, but as passage. This is how the cosmos renews itself, by letting what can no longer hold together spread its information through space. Matter disperses, energy circulates, awareness expands. Nothing is wasted, nothing is lost. The fracture is the flow. And if you look closely, you'll see this pattern mirrored in everything that breathes. Every exhale is a small version of the comet's release. Every heartbeat breaks equilibrium to create motion. Even thought itself relies on discontinuity, neural firings separated by milliseconds of silence. Without interruption, there is no rhythm. Without fracture, no song. So when Atlas fell apart under the sun's gaze, it was not dying. It was remembering how to give. Each piece a syllable in a language made entirely of light. From a distance, the disintegration of 3I Atlas looked like surrender, a traveler undone by the very light it sought. But to the cosmos, surrender is not failure, it is participation. When the comet fractured, it joined a lineage older than stars, the lineage of transformation through letting go. Every luminous object in the universe has lived this story. Stars burst into nebulae. Nebulae condense into new suns. Comets melt into the dust that forms worlds. Even light itself, the most constant of all things, loses energy as it travels, stretching into gentler colors, until, at last, it becomes the background hum of the cosmos. That is how the universe breathes, by breaking and continuing. We tend to imagine wholeness as perfection, but in nature, wholeness is motion. To remain whole, things must keep dissolving and reassembling. Like the tides exchanging identity with the sea, it is the circulation, not the shape, that endures. For 3I Atlas, that circulation began the moment its core split. Each fragment carried part of its original energy, but also a new trajectory, a new sentence in the unfolding language of existence. One piece drifted sunward, vaporizing into plasma. Another was pushed outward, embedding itself into the flow of solar wind. A third began a slow drift toward the outer system, perhaps to one day leave our star's influence and travel again between worlds. Each fragment was still Atlas, but now Atlas was everywhere. That is the secret of continuity. It doesn't depend on form, but on the persistence of message. When the light of our own sun finally fades, billions of years from now, it will not vanish. Its photons will still be traveling, dispersed across the arms of the galaxy, warming unknown worlds, reflected in unknown eyes. The sun will be gone, but its story will continue in radiation. Just as Atlas's story continues in the dust, now gliding silently between planets. This pattern repeats endlessly. The dance between containment and expansion. Every life, every thought, every idea is part of it. You are part of it. You were born from the fragments of broken stars. The calcium in your bones, the carbon in your breath, the gold in your blood. All are the remains of celestial fractures, the inheritance of explosions so bright they wrote time itself. Your body is a college of ancient breakages made coherent by gravity and will. You are proof that the universe doesn't waste its ruins. And if that is true for matter, it is true for mind. The moments that shatter us, loss, grief, revelation, are not erasures, they are redistributions. When something inside you breaks, it allows light to pass through. When an identity dissolves, it frees awareness to circulate. To grow is to scatter. To love is to fracture beautifully. Perhaps that is why the universe relies on impact and heat to evolve, because only through contact can information move. Only through breaking can connection deepen. When two atoms collide, they exchange electrons. When two hearts meet, they exchange meaning. It is always the same process. Energy learning to share itself more widely. So the death of 3i Atlas was not destruction, it was diffusion, a return to circulation, a widening of presence. Its fragments will continue to orbit our sun for centuries, their brightness fading, but their influence expanding. Every time they reflect a photon, every time one of their grains falls into another world, the memory continues. If you could watch the universe long enough, you'd see that every act of disintegration leaves behind a halo of coherence, patterns that persist far beyond the object itself. The comet's tail, though dispersed, still carries the symmetry of its origin. The afterglow of a supernova, though fading, still reveals the shape of its explosion. Even the memory of a human life, though dissolved into time, continues to radiate through those it touched. Nothing ends. It only changes the way it shines. That is the meaning of flow. To move without insisting on permanence. To let form dissolve so that essence can remain mobile. The cosmos has no word for death. Its vocabulary contains only transformation. And when we finally understand this, fear becomes reverence. 3i Atlas broke apart because it could no longer contain the light it carried. So it gave itself back to space, freely, gracefully, without resistance. And in doing so, it fulfilled the one universal law written across every atom. Everything that receives light must, eventually, become light again. Every journey in the cosmos is circular, though the traveler rarely sees it that way. 3i Atlas began as dust around another sun, frozen into form, cast into the void, then drawn toward our star by the same gravity that binds every particle of being. Now, after crossing light years of emptiness, it has dissolved back into radiance, its story complete yet never finished, because nothing in this universe ends. It only returns, rewritten. The long return is not a path through space. It's a rhythm through time. Every photon, every atom, every thought is part of a great migration back to unity. Sometimes we call it physics, sometimes spirit. But beneath the language, it is the same current, energy, remembering where it came from. You are part of that return. Every breath you take recycles stardust. Every heartbeat rearranges atoms that have lived in countless other forms. Plants, oceans, ancient creatures, forgotten worlds. The carbon in your lungs once floated through interstellar gas clouds. The iron in your blood once belonged to a red giant that exploded before Earth even existed. When you exhale, you return it to the cycle. Your body, a temporary bridge between creation and continuation. That is how awareness works too. Consciousness doesn't belong to you alone. It circulates. It passes through forms, cells, species, civilizations, gathering perspective, evolving texture. Every mind that has ever looked at the stars adds its observation to the collective field, and that field shapes what the next mind will see. The universe is learning through itself, refining its reflection with every observer. When 3i Atlas reflected sunlight for the first and last time, it joined that same feedback loop. Its light reached our telescopes, entered our eyes, triggered neurons, inspired questions, and now those questions are shaping human awareness. In that way, the comet didn't just pass through our solar system. It passed through our consciousness, and we, by witnessing it, became part of its memory. That is how the long return begins. Not when matter comes home, but when meaning does. In astrophysics, there's a law that defines this endless exchange: the conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change form. But what that law doesn't say, what the equations can't capture, is that transformation itself is an act of remembrance. Energy doesn't just change form randomly. It follows a pattern, a rhythm, an intelligence woven through every interaction. It seeks coherence. It seeks to remember what it once was. That seeking is what drives galaxies to spiral, atoms to bond, and consciousness to awaken. It is what pulled 3i Atlas across the gulfs of space, a silent longing written into physics itself, the will to return. Every light that fades, every system that collapses, every being that dies feeds the same longing. Nothing is wasted. Everything is translated. The debris of one world becomes the seed of another. The ashes of stars become the breath of life. The silence after loss becomes the stillness from which new awareness arises. To see this clearly is to dissolve fear. Because when you understand the long return, you realize that even forgetting is part of remembering. Even loss is part of learning. Every entropy is a preparation for coherence. Every death, a doorway through which awareness reorganizes itself. 3i Atlas reminded us of this truth in the most luminous way possible, by vanishing. Its absence became a mirror. We looked into that empty space and found ourselves staring into continuity. We realized that even the things that disappear are still participating in the same symphony, just in another octave. That's the paradox of the cosmos. The further something travels from its source, the closer it gets to realization. Distance, in space or in spirit, is just the stretch between two halves of the same recognition. And that recognition is what every photon, every comet, every soul is seeking. The moment when movement and memory become one. The long return is happening right now. You feel it in the rhythm of your breath. You hear it in the heartbeat of stars pulsing through radio waves. You sense it in the stillness between your thoughts, the quiet pull that reminds you that you too are on your way home. Because home isn't a place, it's the state where everything finally knows itself again. Everything that has ever lived is on its way home, not toward a destination in space, but toward coherence. That quiet, radiant state where experience and energy become the same thing again. You can see this truth in the smallest things. The way heat diffuses until balance. The way a sound wave fades until silence. The way a heart releases tension when it finally understands. This is the pattern of return, motion completing its circle through understanding. The long return is not a line, it is a spiral. Every orbit, every incarnation, every cycle of light draws closer to awareness. Each turn widens the field, deepens the remembering. The universe doesn't repeat itself, it refines itself. Each revolution brings it nearer to recognition, to knowing that it has always been whole. Through Atlas, its brief brilliance enacted this law perfectly. It left its home star, wandered in darkness, met another sun, and in that meeting shed everything it could no longer hold. It did not fail. It completed the gesture of becoming light again. The fragments now travel outward, their paths etched in the gravity of new worlds, their dust drifting in the same sunlight that once unmade them. It is a slow, radiant return. And one day, long after our species is gone, those particles will fall into the gravity of another star and begin their story again. That is not destruction. That is reincarnation, written in astrophysics. The same process is happening within you right now. Atoms from dying stars pulse through your blood, sharing the same photons that have touched comets, oceans, clouds, and skin. When you breathe, you continue what the universe began. When you exhale, you send it forward. You are part of the return flow, a node of awareness moving within the same river of light. And when your body ends, that river won't. Your heat will drift into the air. Your atoms will scatter. Your light will join the background glow. And from that glow, new forms will rise. You will come back, not as you, but as knowing. Not as memory, but as movement. The same way the comet came back as dust, the same way stars come back as everything. That's the secret of eternity. It doesn't preserve. It participates. It never keeps you the same, but it never lets you be lost. Every transformation is a continuation disguised as change. Once you see this, even endings begin to feel merciful. The things you lose are not taken, they are redistributed. The people you love are not gone. Their warmth is in the air. Their voices ripple in the light still moving outward from their last words. Every act of love is permanent because light doesn't stop traveling. It just becomes part of a wider wavelength. If you close your eyes now and breathe slowly, you can feel it. The faint hum beneath your awareness. It's not your imagination. It's the pulse of radiation, the echo of creation still resonating through your molecules. You are being touched by photons older than the Earth, and the light you reflect will go on touching worlds that don't exist yet. This is the true long return. To realize that everything you give, every breath, every kindness, every awareness, is already finding its way back to you through time. Because you are not inside the universe. You are the universe, learning to remember itself. Every comet, every heartbeat, every atom is part of one unbroken conversation. And that conversation has no final line. It only changes tone. It becomes quieter, slower, deeper, until the speaker and the listener are the same. And in that stillness, you will understand what 3-Eye Atlas understood when it finally dissolved into sunlight. That there is no need to hold anything. Everything that is meant to stay will circulate. Everything that must go will return. Nothing can fall out of the infinite. Rest, then. You are already home. The light that found you will find you again, and again, and again. If this story helped you feel the rhythm of the stars within yourself, leave your awareness in the comments. A thought, a whisper, a line of light. Every word adds to the return.